Welcome to the Non-Essential Podcast. I'm Steve Gibson.
I'm Ben Matlock.
And man, this is weird today. I've switched headphones, and it's like a whole different experience.
Yeah, I'm a completely new person.
It's like I listen to a lot of local radio, sports mostly, but every now and then they do that, like they have to get a new mic or they fuck with their settings or something, and it's like, holy shit, this guy sounds like that.
Well, like now you get to hear the show for what it is, which is you and me talking to an empty room. I tried to hide it from you for the first 7 episodes, but it turns out it's just me here. Our whole audience was a lie. So,
but the good news is now that they're earbuds and not over the ear, this show's coming to you with like 100% less ear sweat. So,
well, it's like you've had sight restored, but now you see the world for what it truly is, and you want nothing more than to like rip your eyes out.
Look at the sun. Look straight at the sun.
Burn them with fire.
So last week we had a good show about a famous Japanese author and actor.
Yeah, not that you fuckers would know it since you turned tail and abandoned the Non-Essential Podcast. That's fine. I'll do the show anyway. I'll talk for an hour. I don't give a fuck. Who needs you?
They heard you were talking about like seppuku. I never say that right. Seppuku, right?
Seppuku, yeah.
Yeah, okay, I got it. Ha. After a week of listening to our show over and over again, I got a word right. Woo-hoo.
Well, I'm sure you've tried it all week. Seppuku. I fuck.
Seppuku. That girl is hard to get. Or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, that's what the song was about.
That's what you do after being forced to watch a musical. But
that's what you do when you're trying to get a girl.
Had John Keeley and his awesome like machine that didn't do shit, but he still made millions off of it.
Yeah, thanks, John.
Citizen.
And I still can't make up my mind. It's been a week, and I still can't decide whether I love him for taking money from dipshits, or I hate him for like how he did it by not really having to try at all.
It's easy to hate people that scam and hoax, but I think I hate more the people that kept accepting the like, oh, you won't have it till next week, okay.
Right, and you hear that story and you're like, you know what, those fuckers deserved it.
Right. This week we have 2 different stories.
Yeah, if you haven't heard the show, any non-essential podcast could be somebody's first non-essential podcast. Me and Steve come together every week with a new story or topic for each other. The other doesn't know what it is, and we just riff on it. And a lot of times it's history, but it can be anything. Urban legends. It's pretty much creepypasta.
That was one of my favorite episodes.
Yeah. So fiction, really.
The only thing I don't like about it is it fucks me up every time I try to do a description of the show, because it's always like, oh, weird stories and like mostly true history and
creepypasta.
Creepypasta.
Wacky noodles. But yeah, this week we got some new topics. My topic this week is about Elmer McCurdy. Oh,
Elmer.
That was your topic too, I take it.
Damn it.
Judging from your reaction. This one's a little bit more well known. I was kind of taking a chance putting this one together because a lot of people have heard of Elmer McCurdy. He got featured on that Drunk History show on Comedy Central, and
fortunately for you, I have not seen that episode, and I don't know who the fuck Elmer McCurdy is. So
you will love him. Elmer McCurdy was born in Washington, Maine in 1880. His mom, Sadie, was 17 and unmarried when she gave birth to him. They never really found out who his father actually was. In order to save Sadie the shame of raising an illegitimate child, her brother George and his wife Helen adopted Elmer, while Sadie lived with them, kind of just as, in his eyes, the aunt.
Classic tale of, like,
don't tell your kid shit.
But,
yeah.
Right.
Hide shit from your kid, it won't fuck him up in the end. George ended up dying of tuberculosis in 1890, and the 2 women moved to a different area of Maine. And around this time, Sadie revealed the truth to Elmer, which it turned out it fucked him up. It pissed him off, and he quickly became just a resentful, unruly, pain-in-the-ass kid. And by the time he was a teenager, he had developed a really heavy drinking problem. It kind of became the go-to for the rest of his life. Like, anytime anything went wrong, he just started boozing hard.
Always a good choice.
I mean, that was kind of, you were either really successful in the late 1800s or you were a piece of shit booze bag. And McCurdy...
Sometimes both, but...
Yeah, well, or one led to the other. And McCurdy went all in on fucking drinking. But once he started getting older, he moved off to live with his grandfather and became an apprentice plumber, which sounds like the worst fucking job. 1800s plumbing?
Yeah, that's what I mean, I don't envy plumbers today.
Oh, God, no.
1800s. Go fix the shit house tube.
Well, like, yeah, at least with plumbing today, it's still fucking horrifying, but there are systems in place to minimize the horrifying. In his day, it was like, well, shitters backed up and it flooded the entire building and people died. You know, like, that's 1800s plumbing. But apparently he was a pretty competent employee and he was doing pretty well. Like, he wasn't rich, but he was living a decent life until the economic downturn in 1898 and he lost his job. And then it just sort of started this spiral. His mom and his grandpa died 2 years after that. And he kind of just left Maine and he started to float around the eastern United States, where he worked as a plumber, but also as a lead miner. Just not really able to hold down a job because he was a fucking alcoholic.
Just real quick too, I loved that phrase, the float around when he's a plumber.
Well,
like,
yeah, like the turd he was. No, McTurdy, more like. So after off and on jobs, moving around and being arrested for public intoxication one time, McCurdy joined the army, where any good alcoholic finds his calling. He was a machine gun operator, but he was also trained to use nitroglycerin for demolition purposes. At least they say they trained him. From the sounds of it, all he seemed to know was that it could blow up.
This stuff, it goes boom.
But
here's your badge.
But he fancied himself something of an expert. So he got honorably discharged in 1910. I'm not really sure what he did or how I guess they were just like, yeah, you can go.
Time's up.
Yep, that's how the Army always has been, right? And he went to St. Joseph, Kansas, where he met up with an old Army friend. Him and his friend eventually got arrested for possessing burglary paraphernalia, which included chisels, hacksaws, funnels for nitroglycerin, gunpowder, and money sacks.
See, that's one of those bullshit laws, though. Like how the funnels aren't for nitroglycerin until you've put nitroglycerin. You know, they could just have been funnels. They're beer funnels.
Well, it's like a math equation. Like all that stuff on its own is fine, but you put it all together. And then the money sacks. Like
money sacks I like because in order to call them money sacks, they have to have the like iconic like dollar signs on the side.
Yeah, I just imagine McCurdy dressed like the fucking Hamburglar. And he's like, no, it's not for stealing. This is just a great way to not go sunblind. But at his trial, McCurdy told the judges they were not for burglary, but for a foot-operated machine gun they were inventing that needed money sacks. Like, I don't know what the explanation.
The money sacks are for carrying all the machine gunning stuff.
Yeah, like the chisels.
Or that just shows that you're you're all in on your product. You believe you're like, once this thing takes off, we're going to need these money sacks.
So, yeah, McCurdy was not a very bright man. Do you want to know who was dumber? The jury. They found him not guilty, and he was free to begin his robbery career.
See, and that's what I mean. I like to think that we say the jury was dumb, but it was just one fucker like me that was like, well, wait a minute. How do you know that was for
I've never made a machine gun. Maybe he needed that shit. He probably shouldn't have started his robbery career, but he was free to do so now. McCurdy apparently wanted nitroglycerin to kind of be his thing in his robberies, which fucked up most of his crimes because he was overzealous and he never knew how much to use. So on one attempt, him and 3 other men went after the Iron Mountain, Missouri Pacific train after he had heard one of the cars had a safe with $4,000 in it. They stopped the train, found the safe, and rigged way too much goddamn nitroglycerin to the safe's door. The safe was destroyed along with most of the money. They ultimately netted about $450 in silver coins, most of which had melted and fused into the safe's frame.
Makes them easy to spend.
Yeah, just one big block, you slap it down on the poker table.
This is not that stolen, bloated up money. This is my own melted. I melt my silver.
This is
in the microwave.
Some little bits of this are pure silver. You got to trust me. So later that year, so that was probably his most successful heist. Later that year, him and two men went after the Citizens Bank in Chautauqua. I don't know why I bothered writing that down. It's in Kansas. After 2 hours of hammering on the bank wall, they finally got in, where McCurdy was able to place a nitroglycerin charge around the door of the bank's outer vault. The explosion blew the vault door through the bank, destroying the interior but not damaging the safe within. When he tried to blow the safe door open, the charge wouldn't ignite. Probably realizing that McCurdy didn't know what the fuck he was doing, the lookout man got scared and fled. In the panic, McCurdy and the other men stole about $150 in coins they found in a tray outside the vault.
Nice.
Disappointed, McCurdy split from the group and went to a friend's ranch in Oklahoma, where he stayed in a hay shed and just started drinking heavily, planning his big final score. And what a fucking score it is. Can it be a
final score if you have yet to score? Like, wouldn't it just be a score?
He, I mean, he probably didn't even know it was his final score. He was just, he was just like, man, I gotta get something to break $500. At this point, he hasn't had a robbery that broke 500.
No, it sounds like he's probably spent more on nitroglycerin and tools than...
Yeah. So his final robbery was that of the Katy train, which was said to be carrying $400,000 in cash. So you go from not being able to break 500 to fuck it, go for the gold.
Yep, might as well.
Yeah, you're ready to pitch in the majors. What's the worst that could happen, really? I mean, he's fucked up every robbery since. You might as well try to put it all on black here. Well, they stopped the wrong train. They ended up stopping just a regular passenger train. The men were only able to get $46 from the mail clerk, 2 demijohns of whiskey, a revolver, a coat, and the conductor's watch. Newspapers called it one of the smallest in the history of train robbery.
Fuck, they just cost us more in coal to get this thing back running than they stole from us.
They never mentioned whose coat they took, but I would be pretty pissed if they took my coat because they got the wrong train. It's like, you get assholes. Like,
but that's what it was. It was the one guy that was like laughing at them. He's like, what the fuck? Give us your coat. It's like, God damn it.
Yeah. Understandably disappointed, McCurdy returned to his friend's ranch to drink the whiskey he had stolen. He had also fallen ill by this point with tuberculosis, which he had gotten back in his time working in lead mines. He had pneumonia and also trichinosis. He was already in really bad shape, and it only got worse as he had been finally implicated in this shitty robbery, and a $2,000 reward was issued for his capture. Which is crazy to me.
The reward's more than he's ever stolen in his entire career.
It's probably cheaper to just let him keep trying to rob shit. In fact, because he was so sick, I'm willing to bet he would have died and it would have cost less. Like, I'm sure of it. But after a night of heavy drinking for McCurdy, 3 sheriffs had tracked him to his shed using bloodhounds. At about 7 a.m., McCurdy had woken up, saw that they were outside waiting for him, and haphazardly shot at the posse for about an hour. He didn't hit shit, but he eventually ended up getting shot in the chest himself. That ends the story of McCurdy's life, and this begins the really odd story of his death. Joseph L. Johnson was the owner and undertaker of Johnson Funeral Home, where McCurdy's body was sent. He embalmed the body with an arsenic-based preservative that was typically used to preserve a body for a longer period of time when no next of kin were immediately known. He shaved the face, dressed the body in a suit, and stored it in the back of the home, but he refused to bury or release the body until he was paid for his services.
Well, sure, I mean...
Yeah, so I would just have a dead guy hanging out.
Burying no free corpses. Fuck, he's sitting in the corner.
I'll do everything else, but I won't
use him as a hat rack.
Well, he had a better idea. He came up with the idea to exhibit the body and make some extra money.
Oh, there you go.
Dressing him in street clothes and putting a rifle in his hands, Johnson charged a nickel for people to see, quote, the bandit who wouldn't give up.
It's a little bandit that could. It's heartwarming.
Other nicknames included the Mystery Man of many aliases, the Oklahoma Outlaw, and the Embalmed Bandit. So 2 of them were accurate, 2 of them less so, because people knew who the fuck this guy was. They just didn't know who was related to him. And apparently the nickname I wanted was the Inept Fuck Up, but that wasn't catchy enough, apparently. So eventually 2 men appeared to claim McCurdy's body, stating that they were his long-lost brothers. In actuality, these men were James and Charles Patterson, who owned a traveling carnival, who wanted to add the body to their show.
This was a good idea this guy had. Let's steal it.
Fucking apparently. Wait till you see how far this goes. Johnson didn't question their story, though, and the outlaw who would never be captured alive, that's another nickname, joined the Patterson's traveling carnival until 1922 when Patterson sold his operation to Louis Sonny. Sonny used McCurdy's body in his traveling Museum of Crime show, which featured wax replicas of outlaws like Bill Doolin and Jesse James. So there were 2 fake versions of real outlaws and 1 real version of a shit outlaw.
One actual corpse, yeah.
11 years, this is decades now. 11 years later, the body was acquired by director Dwayne Esper to promote his exploitation film Narcotic. The body was placed in theater lobbies as a dead dope fiend who Esper claimed killed himself in a standoff with the police after a botched drugstore robbery. At this point...
So this would have been in about 1930s?
He died in 1911. This is 1922. Was when Patterson got him. And then, so 1933 is about when Dwayne got him. It's a bit of a...
It just blows my mind that there was, like, a movie at the time called Narcotic about, like, a dope person, a dope dealer, user, whatever, like, getting in a... I know dope probably meant something different then than now, but...
probably, like, opium or something.
Opium, yeah.
But this... spoiler here, this story doesn't end until 1976. So
let me sit back and get comfortable.
It's actually not that much longer, but his death went on for a very long time, apparently. So the body was placed in theater lobbies, botched drugstore robbery. At this point, McCurdy's body had mummified. It had hardened and shrunk to the size of a child's body, which Esper claimed was due to the dope fiend's drug abuse.
Well, sure. That's what we all know that drugs will do that. They'll melt your brain and your body.
So, the body was just loaned out to Dwayne Esper to promote the movie, but it still belonged to Sonny. Louis Sonny died in 1949, and the body was placed in a storage warehouse in L.A. Sonny's son, Dan, would continue to lend McCurdy out for other weird fucking film projects until eventually selling him to a Spoonie Singh, owner of the Hollywood Wax Museum, who had bought him for 2 Canadian men who intended to use the body for a show they were holding at Mount Rushmore. While being exhibited there...
That sounds legit.
Well, this is... It didn't go well. Again, something didn't go well for McCurdy. While being exhibited there, geez, those are words, the body was damaged in a windstorm where the tips of ears, fingers, and toes were blown off. So, his body's just getting fucked up. It's mummified. It's dried out. And then this windstorm happens and, just wrecks it even more. And the men returned the body to Singh, saying it looked too gruesome and not lifelike enough for the exhibit.
That's like the people that return the rental cars. Like, yeah, I can't drive this rental car around. It's all dinged up. Totally wasn't. It was like that when I got it, I swear. Yeah,
and I love the idea that it's not the actual human body isn't lifelike enough for that for their show. So after more moving around, just various fucking odd and showings that were for Singh's profit, McCurdy's corpse ended up hanging out in a funhouse exhibition in 1976. By this point, I'm pretty convinced nobody actually believed this was a real man's body at this point.
Right. It's like, man, this is a pretty good prop. It even smells weird.
In 1976, the production crew for the $6 Million Man were filming scenes at this funhouse. A prop man went to move what he thought was a wax mannequin that was hanging from the gallows, but when the arm broke off, human bone and muscle tissue were visible. During the autopsy, they found mostly the shit you know, the preservative, a bullet jacket, tuberculosis signs in the lungs. But inside his mouth, they found a 1924 penny and various ticket stubs from all the sideshows he had been a part of. So it was pretty easy.
Where do I stick my ticket? I guess here will do.
Right. Just where's the trash? Oh, fuck it. Open up. But with all that information, it became pretty easy to date the body. After about a year of trying to trace his living relatives, but ultimately only kind of figuring out that he came from Oklahoma, they finally were able to get him to Oklahoma and give him a real burial. His service actually had about 300 people in attendance, and he was buried next to the outlaw Bill Doolin. 2 feet of concrete, I believe, was poured over the casket just to make sure
sure nobody fucked with it.
Keep that fucker down for good this time. But yeah, a bit of a shorter one today, but that is Elmer McCurdy, man.
I was really hoping that there would be a running total. It sounds to me like he made more money as a corpse than he did as a burglar.
I don't think we needed to tally that. Like, it's without a doubt. He was more successful in death than he ever was in life.
And it's funny because you hear that and you think like romantic, like, oh, the author or the painter that wasn't appreciated. It's like, he wasn't any of that. He was just a shitty burglar.
You're right.
That, yeah. It's funny because I would have never recognized him by name, but I had heard the story of the train robbery, the first one.
Yeah.
And because I remember I watched Mysteries at the Museum. I was actually one of my like inspirations for wanting to do a show like this where there's just random cool stories. And there's some museum out there that I believe has like a banknote that's like just about a quarter of it left, and it was all burned to shit because they blew the fuck out of that safe. And then I actually heard the story of the body in the funhouse that had been passed down, and nobody realized by that point that it was real. I had no idea that was the same person.
Yeah, that's kind of why I was okay, taking a chance on this story, even though it is a little bit more well known. Because even if you know little parts about McCurdy, not many people, they either know how he lived or they know about the body. They don't really know that, all this shit connected to one dude. One dude who was a fuck up in life, and then just, people became obsessed with making money off his body.
I was going to say, it's all because one asshole undertaker's like, I'm not fucking burying this body without being paid. It's like, he barely had to embalm the guy from as much as the dude drank. He was probably pretty, well mummified already.
Right, because he just did it, and then was like, well, I'm not giving him back until I get paid. But yeah, I just
love the idea of somebody so stubborn. They're like, I'm not getting paid for this? Fuck it, I'll keep the body propped up in the corner.
Yeah, it's fine. You people will pay good money to see the bandit who wouldn't quit.
And they did.
Yeah, and that's the weirdest thing is, what the fuck does that even mean? The bandit who wouldn't quit, he didn't do anything. Apparently he did quit. He died.
And it's interesting to me because it's similar to the loan shark story we had a couple weeks back, where the modus operandi of this criminal was so brilliant that there's no way it could have fucking been anybody else. Investigators had to love the case because people keep blowing shit up with nitroglycerin. I can't imagine they sold nitroglycerin at the corner store, even in the 1800s, early 1900s, for one. And then for two, you probably had one guy in the state that's oh, this guy was a nitroglycerin expert in the military. This is fucking baffling.
Yeah.
And then it's always a bad idea. If you want to go into crime and maybe it's you and your close buddy, it's okay, I get it. Stop fucking getting other people involved. Never.
I mean, if you're a professional crook, you gotta take what you can get,
But he was not a professional crook. That's his problem. It's like you said earlier. He didn't start in the single A ball. He went straight for the majors.
But he was the nitroglycerin bandit. Everybody's heard of him now.
I like to picture him, since he was a heavy drinker, sitting in a saloon, after each of these botched robberies, Nobody fucking respects me. I'm the Nitro Bandit. Damn it.
Nitro Bandit. Yeah, well, all of his robberies end the same way, with him just drinking his sorrows away.
Well, blowing the crap out of everything first, and then...
that's probably why they had to ring him up, was just damages. It's like, you fucker.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. I can't imagine that that bank. We've had our office broken into once, so we don't keep anything. It's usually people looking for cash. When they're breaking into a business, they want some quick money for drugs or alcohol or whatever, or just they want cash.
My lawyer's telling me not to answer that.
That. But anyway, we had somebody years ago break in before we had our alarm system and everything, and they didn't take anything because they ransacked the place, didn't find anything. They didn't take any of the computers or anything. They were just looking for money. But it still cost us $1,000 to replace, because it didn't just break the door, but the whole frame and stuff. Right. So you're like, fuck. So to have half your building blown up and then they take $100 in coins, it's like, what the hell?
You assholes. Well, that's the thing. If he really knew what he was doing with nitroglycerin, he probably could have rigged it, used maybe about an eighth of what he used, actually opened what he meant to open, and actually had a successful robbery. But he would just slap a bunch of that shit on whatever he wanted to blow up, and then be surprised I just fucking blew up an entire bank. Well, shit.
And this all came from his drinking too, because he did it in the army, but they'd drink and you'd boast about oh man, I'm
a demolitions expert.
Yeah, expert. I was the best guy in there. Never had a better guy than me. And they're like, oh, cool, you can blow up the safe. You're like, yeah.
It's there's no way they trained you to do a controlled explosion. They probably just said they probably threw him into shit to be hey, go blow that thing up, and because it's he's such a dipshit that he's the one we can afford to lose if he plants too much. And then he took that as I'm the expert.
Right. And I'm picturing these people that keep going on these heists with him. I was thinking about it, how would they respond? And then you said, oh, the lookout guy, he said, fuck this, and ran away. I'm like, there you go.
He did exactly what I would do, which would be
the second the door blows through the back wall of the bank, be well, I'm out.
To be fair, I would never get in league with a guy named Elmer McCurdy. That's just a bad news name written all over it.
Right.
It's you're no fucking Heisenberg, man.
I think my absolute favorite part of your story this week is it gave me an excuse to talk in a terrible, old-timey cowboy southern accent all the time.
I always wanted to do a, since we started the show, I wanted to find something old Western train robbery, and I think this is the best first choice I could have found. Is just this fuck up, and then just the weird he would probably be pretty pissed to know how much money he got after he couldn't use it.
Right.
So yeah, thank you, Elmer. Wherever you are.
Good dude.
Good man. Good corpse. Not a great man, but he died the way in death he lived more than most of us.
That's true. And it's funny because that's kind of probably one of my biggest nightmares. I don't like attention, and God, I hate the thought of after you die, people just checking out your body. It wouldn't matter, you're fucking dead, but I still don't like that idea.
Yeah, I saw this thing on a sports site I go to recently, a kid got shot, and it was a really tragic thing, but his family, instead of doing an open casket, they dressed him up in his casual clothes and had him in a lounging posture playing NBA 2K. And it's a cool thing because it's what he loved to do. Yeah. And it's a genuinely sweet thing to do for a lost, especially if it's your son.
Well, and it helps with, because the hardest thing when somebody dies is trying to remember them how you knew them for their entire life, and not for the last 5 minutes you saw them in a casket. So.
Right. In death, you want to kind of remember how they lived, and so for them, it's a really cool thing. The photo of it is so fucking eerie. It's such a disturbing thing to be an outside observer just seeing it on the internet and being holy shit.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, for me, I don't give a shit. Once I'm dead, you can do whatever you want with my body. I've always said that.
I'll keep that in mind.
I'm pretty sure we said it on this show. Like, fucking do something really cool with it. Like, just, like, throw me around like a Trials character. Just, like, just a fucking ragdoll thing, and just, like, throw me out of a plane, whatever. Just see what happens. Mythbusters, my ass.
Yeah.
I want to be the new Buster.
You last for half an experiment, but what an experiment it would be.
Hell yeah, dude. I would finally get Adam and Jamie back in the same room together.
Anyway, my story this week's about two horny dudes. Vikings, of course. And so they have the horny helmets, you get it. Except for they didn't actually wear those, but...
I was going to say, this podcast is going to get a little saucy.
Woohoo!
Woohoo.
I wrote my script up a little different this week, too. It's more of a story base instead of bullet points, so we'll see how this goes. But, so, once upon a time, and that time being the 9th century, the Scandinavian king known as Ragnar Lodbrok had a son.
I'm pretty sure that's a super mega baseball character on my team.
Ragnar Lodbrok, up to bat, third baseman.
Can't hit shit.
He had a son named Bjorn Ironside. And when one's name contains the phrase Ironside, there's really only a handful of like career options. Because metal-clad American Civil War Navy frigates hadn't been invented yet, he became a terrifying Viking ruler instead. But some years before that, we'll say about 30, because these two people, they're actually relatively well-known Vikings as well. But historians don't seem to know a whole lot about their specifics. But this guy was a bit older than Bjorn, so we'll say he was born about 30 years before. But another Viking came around, and his name was just Hastein. So you'd think he wasn't a very successful Viking if you're just like Hastein and not like...
But he was the most dangerous man on the planet.
Like, I'm picturing like Hastein Steel Skull or Hastein the Copper Bottom or whatever, but it's just Hastein.
Hastein Kitten Friend.
Yeah. But despite this like lackluster name, or maybe because of it, he had already like proven himself a more than competent Viking guy. So early in...
That was their official title, right?
Right.
Viking guy.
Welcome back to the motherland, Viking guy.
Thank you.
You have done us an honor.
Thank you, great Viking guy.
Early in Hastings's career, he led successful sackings, pillagings, and general nastinesses against the island of Normatir. This is going to have a lot of these this week. Which apparently is an island off the French coast and not a made-up place. And then have you ever visited the Frankish Empire? No? That's probably because he Vikinged the hell out of it. In fact, there was one writer of the time, like from the area, not a Viking writer, but they talked about how like the Frankish Empire was so like vulgar and dirty, and there were oath breakers, and they deserved the hell that this Viking had rained down upon them. So his early career, he had built himself up quite a name. So going back to the young Bjorn Ironside, when he came of age, which I figure was like 9 years old because they're fucking Vikings.
Right.
His father decided to hook him up with this Hastings guy, since he had crushed the like totally not fake French island and that kind of thing. And they set out with a fleet of 62 ships to do more Viking marauding. That's really like all they did.
Yeah, that's kind of what you do.
And I even made a note here. It says they set sail with 62 ships. I'm like, is that a lot or a little? Like, it sounds like a lot to me, but I don't fucking know what a normal Viking fleet was.
Apparently enough to get some good Viking done.
Vikings. If it's like 62, like those badass Viking ships with the drum guys and the like paddle slaves or whatever, that's a pretty good army. If it's like 62 Viking kayaks, that might not be
62
quite so.
combat canoes storming down the river.
So they set out, the two of them together, teaming up, set out and headed for Spain, where they first encountered the Austrians, which was, God, that word fucking tripped me up all week, because it's like, oh, Austrians. No, Austrians of the kingdom Asturias.
So,
and I'm still saying it wrong, but I'm trying to overpronounce it to point out that it's not Austria, which wouldn't have been around yet anyway. I don't think. I'm a shit historian. And it's not Australians, it's Austrians. But it turns out that these people were more difficult to defeat than their name is to pronounce, so they had to kind of retreat without much success.
Sir, we've lost too many boats. It's like,
my tongue is tied. We must surrender. Whatever.
It's just fishing boats. Why can't we win?
Because I'm picturing them up there like, okay, man, go attack the fuck. And the men are like, who do we? Whatever. Let's turn.
Well, I bet it was one of those things where it's just like there's no strategy to it, and it's just like we're gonna just take shit, and then like they're just sort of standing on land. It's like, hey, there's a bunch of guys saying they're gonna take our shit. Should we just fuck them up? And
yeah, they're fighting back, sir. Retreat. So after that, they decided to take on the Caliphate of Cordoba, which occupied the city of Nibla. God, I love these like names back then. That was an area.
Caliphate's one of my favorite words.
Yeah, Caliphate's a cool word, but then Nibla and Cordoba. Cordoba's whatever. But that was an area in southern Spain. However, they were unable to take a bite out of the Nibblers' defenses. I counted on that sounding a lot more like nibblers, but whatever. You get where I was.
Anytime you say
that.
Taking a bite, I just imagine Scruff McGruff.
Scruff McGruff. Ah, yes, Scruff McGruff, the old Viking warlord.
The Vikings, the first to take a bite out of crime.
So after that, they're down 0-2 versus the Mediterranean opponents. But then their fortune turned with the successful sacking of the port city of Algeciras, which we all know was the largest city along the Bay of Gibraltar. And then they had more successful raids along the Mediterranean coast in northern Africa and southern Spain. They settled near the Rhone River and took the winter off because even Vikings are like, fuck it, we need a Christmas holiday.
Yeah.
And, well, I imagine in the winter it's got to be awful living on the ocean, especially back then at the time. But in the winter, it's like, yeah, fuck this.
I just don't think they cared, really. It was probably awful a lot of the time. It was like if we weren't like taking somebody else's shit, we were realizing just how like shitty our lives were.
And it's funny because this is something, not that I like read specifically about Vikings all the time, but I do know they went on these just like pillaging and murdering road trips. But they would just like, let's just form a town right now and we'll just kick it here for about a year or two and then we'll continue on. Like, we need to rest. And so you've got these other countries that are being invaded, and the next thing you know, you look over like, oh, fuck, do you see who our new neighbors are? But anyway, so they continued their marauding after that, and they racked up a score. They were up like 10-2 if you're keeping like sports score on this. So Hastein and Ironside were getting pretty damn like full of themselves. They moved back into the Mediterranean and they set their sights on a little area called Italy. They'd heard of a city-state there called Rome that was supposed to be this big, magnificent thing, and they thought, why the fuck not? Well, let's take on Rome.
Yeah, there you go.
You know, even though their first two battles have been just random cities, like they couldn't succeed.
Yeah, you couldn't fucking take Australian. But yeah, you're ready for Rome.
Yeah, well, they were on like a 10 pillage win streak.
This was McCurdy's Katie train, man. He was just like, fuck it.
Fuck it.
That was all warm up.
So, arriving in Rome, Hastings and Bjorn scoped the place out. Bjorn Ironside, he was actually known for his use of like cunning and intelligence rather than classic brute like force Vikingness. Literally, that's like he was known as like the smart Viking. So they're checking out Rome, and he quickly figures out that they're never going to be able to breach the walls. So they return to their ship. Few days later,
I love it, sir. We've gone up to the wall and screamed "ah" with our clubs, and it's still not coming down.
I tapped on it; it seemed pretty damn solid. Fuck, I thought it was paper mache. So they go back to their ship, and a few days later, a small group of messengers approaches the city, and the city, who had certainly noticed a fleet of 60 Viking ships on its shores, were a little leery of the visitors, but they agreed to hear them out. The messengers relayed an unfortunate turn of events. Their beloved leader, Hastein, had fallen deathly ill. Based on my best scientific estimates, this guy was probably like 40 or 50 at this point, which in Viking years has to be like 102.
Right.
So he had fallen deathly ill, and the war had been taking its toll on him. But just before he died, Hastein confided that he had a change of heart and wanted to forsake his Viking heritage and convert to Christianity. After having proclaimed Christ his one true savior, and presumably giving a long, like, Shakespearean soliloquy, like, I see the light, he died. His last wish, according to the messenger, was to be buried in the city's consecrated ground with a proper Christian funeral. City officials weren't too keen on this due to not having forgotten about the 60 Viking warships that had been sitting off the coast, but they were kind of handcuffed by their religious beliefs, because when you're a Christian, it's like all about converting people to Christianity. So when somebody says, oh, this like heathen Viking has seen the true way and wants to be a Christian, it's like, well, fuck, okay. So they agreed to have his body brought into the city along with a small escort of guards. There was 50 or so Vikings clad in their finest burial robes, carrying the beloved leader's body through the gates along the winding street and into the church where Hastein would receive his pre-burial sacraments. Upon arriving at the church, the priests gathered around the body, and just as they started the ceremony, Hastein made a miraculous recovery from death, leapt to his feet, and drew his sword. Also, the 50 men who had snuck swords in under their robes drew their weapons. It's apparently a cunning plan that nobody could have ever fucking seen coming.
Just giving him like that It's Always Sunny ocular pat down. It's like, he had robes on.
Robes on, yeah. I mean, of course they've got robes on. It's a funeral.
You can't fit a sword in a robe. That's ridiculous.
Look, buddy, if you can't trust a Viking, who can you trust?
You can't trust a guy like Ironside?
So suddenly Hastings wasn't dead and certainly wasn't Christian because they slaughtered the shit out of everybody in the church before making their way down the streets and easily taking the gate from the inside. At which point, Bjorn Ironside and the rest of the Vikings were able to storm the city, and the city's soldiers and townsfolk were all slaughtered without prejudice. Hastein and Bjorn had done the impossible, although they always thought it was possible, and they had sacked the mighty city of Rome. Apparently nothing could stop these guys now. That's like their 11th win in a row. Nothing except the lack of a good map. I said you've probably never heard the story about how Rome was sacked and pillaged by Vikings in the 9th century, and there's a good reason for that. While their Monty Python-esque ruse was successful, and they did indeed sack the city, the problem was the city was not Rome. Nope, they had just sacked a city called Luna, which was a very prosperous Roman city, but not Rome itself. So
Jesus fucking Christ, dude.
Yeah. I mean, it makes you wonder, like, because they walked away like, fuck yeah, Vikings rule, yeah.
That's like that's like if I walk over to my neighbor's house, knock him out, and be like, yeah, I just fucking conquered Canada. Like, you know what you're taking, man.
Yeah, they and like I said, Ironside was supposed to be the cunning, like the smart Viking. So that they weren't smart enough to actually know where the fuck they were going. And it turns out they just kind of were sailing around this Italy area looking for the city they'd heard of called Rome, and they see this giant city with these walls. They're like, that's gotta fucking be it.
Yeah, it's the only city with walls.
In a way, they're kind of lucky, because had they tried this on Rome, they probably would have got their asses handed to them.
Yeah, because Rome is packed.
Even in, like, Rome's, like, not so great times, it's like Rome's population is made up of, like, 98.9% soldiers.
Yeah.
Don't quote me on that, kiddos, if you're doing a report, but anyway.
A lot of soldiers is the point.
Yeah, right. So they had actually taken Luna, not Rome, but whatever. To them, plundering's a plundering. I don't know at what point they figured it out. Like,
I like to think never.
They get back home and Bjorn Ironside's telling his dad, the king, is like, Dad, dude, we took fucking Rome. And Dad's sitting there talking to like a person from Rome. Like, did ya?
That's not. Where the fuck were you again? Because I'm talking to Rome right now.
Yeah. See, it was this bay. It looked like this, and the city had these walls. Be like, that wasn't fucking Rome, you moron.
Bunch of places have walls, idiot. Like,
Well, but we still murdered the fuck out of him. Well, that makes you a Viking hero, so
Yeah,
whatever.
you are a Viking. You might be more of a Viking because you really don't give a shit.
You don't care. It's just as long as you kill stuff.
Yeah.
It's like... So after that, they went on to carry out some more successful raids before losing more than half of their fleet to a Muslim naval force that was employing catapults and Greek fire, a tactic which Bjorn Ironside would later call unfair. Probably,
I love it.
I don't know that he actually called it that because I don't have access to the newspapers from back then.
But I love the idea of him like,
Yeah.
that's bullshit,
That's
man.
not fair. They had this magic fire shit.
That's like getting mad somebody uses a Hadouken in Street Fighter. What the
Right.
fuck? Fucking fireballs? Like, learn to really fight. It's Street Fighter, asshole.
But not getting mad about it until after you've done like the cheapest like turtle tactics that you could come up with.
Right.
Well, when we do it, it's Vikingness. When they do it, it's just cheating. But when they returned home, they were both hailed as heroes because nothing is more heroic than just murdering, raping, robbing thousands of like hapless citizens. Even if you did tend to lose to places that had actual military forces.
Yeah, that's one thing, like, a little off topic, but, like, I've never really understood, like, the glorifying of Vikings, and I like a lot of dumb history shit, you know? And it's like...
It's one thing to appreciate, like, how colorful and celebrated and documented their history was, but they were fucking terrible.
Right. Like, when you see people on Twitter who model their whole internet persona under, like, Viking shit, is like... You do realize, like, they were the worst. Like, in every way.
Right. Because they literally would. And when I say they would sail around looking for places to plunder, it wasn't like they would be like, okay, you, me, we're meeting in the bay in 3 days. Bring it on. It was just like, here's this little villa with, like, farmers and whatnot. Let's go rape and kill and burn everything down just for the fuck of it.
It's like, yeah, it was kind of, you know, the real... living circumstances of pirates without the cool hats. So,
right. Well, and in fairness, pirates only attacked you if you were a jerk that went on the sea with stuff to steal. Like, fair game, you're on the ocean.
Not true. Our own show disproved that. Like, they went after fucking towns and ports and shit. But they also wore silly clothing and like they made robbery and murder and awful things fun.
Well, I was gonna say, and they sang while they did it, but Vikings, you know, there's a long history of Viking songs too.
But they didn't do Drunken Sailor.
Right.
Well, maybe they had their own version, but until that's confirmed, I'm going to always put Vikings below Pirates.
Vikings below them. Plus, they're a crappy football team, so. But anyway, that's my story. There's no like real big ending. Like they came back, they were considered successes. They went on to both be storied Viking leaders.
For sacking not Rome.
But yeah. I mean, that's what drew me to this story, though, is it's got the two great parts. The first one is that they were able to trick this whole fucking... Well, I say trick, but it's like the city didn't want to go along with it the whole time. They're like, I don't think we trust you guys. And you know, there was just like the one asshole that was like, look,
we gotta do
this
it.
is the right thing to do. We gotta be good neighbors. Like, yeah, they're Vikings. Yeah, they've burned a whole bunch of places to the ground. But they say they changed their mind. This guy... You know, they lost their poor leader. Like, let's be nice to him. And then I can just, like, picture half the clergy as they're getting impaled with swords, like, going, I told you so!
Well, that's
like,
one of those things where it's like, we will totally do that for you right after I stab him one more time to be sure. You know, like...
Right.
Like, I'm totally okay doing you guys this solid, but I am going to cut his head off because I don't want him getting up.
It's the, like, Trojan horse thing without actually building a Trojan horse. Just being like, look, dude, you're like, let us in. Don't worry. We won't do anything. This guy's dead. Without this one guy, we couldn't possibly fight.
Instead of, like, we come bearing gifts, it's just like, okay, can we come in now? And like, yeah, sure.
So that part I liked of the story. And then the fact that they, like, this stupid plan works, and they're like, fuck yeah, we win. It's like, yeah, but this is the wrong city.
That's my favorite part, and I also, like I said, I love the idea of even if it's not true, the idea of them being like, oh, Greek fire, that's bullshit.
That's not fair. We don't have that.
That's fighting like a wimp, all right? Combat canoes
honor.
and clubs, all right? That's how we fight.
And I do also like that. And again, it just shows that if somebody hears this and they're like a Viking historian, they'll write in all pissed off at me. But it really makes it like...
Please do. If you are a Viking historian, write in pissed off at Steve. That way I know somebody's listening, and that way Steve knows that he needs to check himself.
My point was going to be, like, it shows how much their society was just about killing other people when you can come back. Out of 62 ships, they said like 40 of them were lost in that final battle. And you got to imagine there was a few lost here and there along the way. But even if not, even if you just lost 40 out of your 62 ships and you get back and everybody's like, oh, hail the heroes. It's like, you brought back a third of your fleet.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, but these ones didn't die. Those ones that died, they're not heroes. Fuck them.
Yeah,
they weren't true Vikings.
Well, I mean, like, we gave them shit today, but like any sort of famous culture, like there's a lot of depth to, like, even if it's awful depth, it's the sort that, like, we know about them for a reason, because they were very like kind of detailed segment of history. So.
Well, and they had like their very deep traditions and lore. And like I said, I'm not saying you're wrong if you think Viking culture was interesting or cool to study, but they were not heroes.
Yeah. Like and this, like I said, this is coming from somebody who like adores all the details about pirates, just eats that shit up. Like, I think I said it in the fuck, I already forgot his name, but
Limahong.
Limahong, yeah, that's right. My story, you remember it.
Only because I was thinking about it earlier today, but
like we said in that episode, like, these were fucking terrible people living shitty lives. By and large, there's just amusing things about them,
right?
So yeah, we've always, as a species, we've always been enamored with like the worst of us. To me, it's just it feels like with Vikings more so. Like, it's weird to say that because there's like Pirates of the Caribbean and shit, and like we have this dramatic idea of pirates now. They were just freedom seekers. It's like, no, they were fucking bad.
Right.
But
like anything, there's whole spectrums too. You had your legitimate swashbucklers, that privateers, but I'm not saying they were good because they were still killing people and stealing their stuff. But they legitimized it by saying, I'm doing it for my country.
Yeah.
And almost all of them realized, wait a minute, I'm the biggest force on this fucking ocean. I can take from my country, too.
Yeah. But with, like, Vikings, there's this weird kind of hero worship sometimes I see online where it's like, they all think they're fucking Kratos in the new God of War, just, like, gruff fucking bearded bald dudes with axes, man. It's like... Yeah,
it's the honor of battle. It's something that we've always, I think, as a civilization, we're good at too, and be like, they went up against this like life and death fight, and they won, and that makes them good. It's like, well, it doesn't make them not the villain,
right?
I mean, there is like, if you want to almost put it that way, the bravery aspect. Well, definitely a bravery aspect. If they told you get in this fucking little wooden boat and go all up and down Europe and just
get in your combat canoe, only a third of you are going to come back.
Right. So there's bravery there, but bravery doesn't automatically equal good.
Right. But, like, and is it even bravery? Like, a lot of these cases, it was either like necessity.
Well, that's true too, because if you said no, like they said, go pillage, and you go, no, they're like, well, then we're going to kill you right here on the spot. It's like, well, maybe I'll go pillage.
Right. Like, their whole fucking society revolved around this type of shit. Like, it's not really bravery any more than, like, what these places they were robbing were doing to survive. It's like, they were growing shit, they were trying to build up an economy. The Viking economy could often just be, it was go in and plunder. And it all revolved around that. And
again, there would be historians that would hear this and be like, you're an idiot. And I think with their society, it was almost less about plunder, although of course they plundered, but I think it was less about the physical goods that they stole, because when you're not interacting with these outside economies, it doesn't matter how much gold you steal, because what the fuck does gold mean?
Right.
But it's more about they were dealing in the economy of like fear and respect. Like, you got to think, at that as bad as it was that they came and like they did this, I don't hear too many stories about Europeans going up to attack the Vikings. They were probably like, fuck, stay away from those guys.
Right.
Like, could you imagine an entire country full of these? Fuck no.
Yeah, okay. It's why they stand out and throughout history is like, despite never really, they never took Rome. They never like really had this like fucking huge stretch of empire reach out, but like what they had was theirs, and they got to keep it for a very long time because they were, people were probably scared shitless of them.
Right. Like that's the other thing. Had it been Rome, or even in the fact that case that it wasn't and it was Luna, they never took these places and are like, these are ours now. It was more like, we took this place, we burned it to the ground, see you later. Like, it wasn't about like expansion. We'll put it that way. But,
yeah, it was more like, it was like you said, it was reputation, resources, and just, desire.
Yeah, it's the bully that would shove you into the locker, but wouldn't take your lunch money. Although they did take your lunch money.
They would take
raped your wife.
They would take they would take everybody's lunches.
Yeah. And I know they did trade or I think they traded in slaves too. But
yeah.
So yeah. Anyway, so that's my story this week.
Good folk.
The sacking of not Rome.
Yeah. Nicely done, you dumb fucks. And that goes for McCurdy too. You all totally achieved nothing that you meant to achieve. But
I have noticed that we tend to gravitate towards these stories, and probably because I can't speak for you, but I personally identify them so much with them so much. These stories of these people that just they can't fucking get it right.
Yeah, I think I think since our show is watching two dudes fail in real time, basically, I think we're really drawn to the idea of like historical failure, like somehow leading to some sort of prominence.
Yeah, and it kind of makes me feel better because none of my fuck ups are so bad that I pillaged the wrong city.
Who cares that we couldn't keep this show's momentum going for 8 episodes? Like we didn't even make it till 10 until the fucking audience died. But maybe we'll end up like McCurdy, and after death, that's when we'll get our recognition. Okay.
Certainly, at least when something happens and CNN runs like a clip of our show because they're like, "Oh, that Steve guy, just listen to this." But yeah. Anyway, that's this week's show. If you have story suggestions, comments on what we've discussed, or just want to tell us how great or terrible we are, I prefer great. You can find us at Non-Essential Pod on the Twitter and at The Non-Essential Pod on Facebook. We're also on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, or anywhere else that you prefer to listen to your podcasts. Yep. As always, thanks for listening, and we hope you found our show non-essential.
That's not what I hope at all. That
was just the fucking title.
That was just supposed to be a cutesy name. Like I actually, if they find it non-essential, they unsubscribe. Steve.
You can't live without it.
You really got to work on your PR, man. Like, goodbye, everyone. We hope we wasted your time.
I honestly do, though.